Yeah. In what?
All right, Rambam for Tuesday, Chav Ches Menachem Av, Tavshin Pei, the fourth Perek of Hilchos Avoda Zara. So after we learned yesterday about the mitzvahs relating to the actual worship of Avoda Zara, so today we're already moving on to the next topic. The next topic is the din of a madiach and the iranidacha, someone who's causing a whole group of people to do Avoda Zara. And what happens if it's a whole city? In this parak, we're going to cover mitzvahs. Right, the Rambam actually is not going to mention that. It's not going to. It's just, everything is theoretical and everything could be.
It still has to be learned. It's not being
right. Yeah. Yeah, so the Rambam is not going to mention that it's not actually, according to the Gemara, never actually happened. Of course, in the Gemara, there's actually an argument about whether it actually happened or not. The Rambam is just going to, in theory, the halachas are always relevant wherever we have it based in Eretz Yisrael. So it's a mitzvah like any other. We have to study it. So we're going to cover mitzvahs numbers 9 through 12. So number 1 is the madiach, really, not the erenidachas, just that you shouldn't be a madiach, the punishment of the madiach. And there are 3 relating to the erenidachas, which is 10 to burn it, 11 not to rebuild it, and 12 to not derive any benefit from it. We're going to start with mitzvah number 9, which is the din of the madiach himself, the person responsible, or the people responsible. Halacha Aleph, madichi irmi Yisrael, harei elu niskalin, afal pi shle avdu, avoda zara. So those who cause an entire city to go serve Avoda Zara, which gives them the title of madiach, so their punishment is actually skila. Even though they didn't actually do Avoda Zara themselves, all they did was cause other people, persuade other people to do it until they went ahead and did it. So the whole halacha here is literally just relating to persuasion, nothing to do with your own personal behavior. That's the whole chiddush, because if they would have served Avoda Zara themselves, it'd be chayav skila anyway. The chiddush is that even if they didn't serve Avoda Zara and they just convinced others in this kind of context, then you're also chayav skila. Of course, this din is also mentioned yesterday. With these dinim are coming from Sanhedrin, Masechah Sanhedrin, Perek Daled Misus. We have Elohim and Eskalin, so this is also there on the list and discussed over there. You got skila for being a madiach as well, not just serving Avoda Zara in the different forms that we discussed. Now you know that the Rambam writes, later we're going to see with a mesis, in the next paragraph it talks about a mesis, someone who convinces individuals to serve Avoda Zara. The halacha is that you have witnesses hiding behind, and the second they hear him say it, you put him to death right away. So it's nothing to do with the outcome of the mesis. It's the behavior of the mesis, trying to persuade others. With the madichim, it's ad she'avdu, so it's actually only if they actually cause the city to become a erenidachas, or at least a large group of people to serve Avoda Zara.
Is it city of Yidden?
Of course, yes. No, city of Yidden. We're talking about Yidden here, all Yidden. And the first Shem, the Rambam discussed this point further about the fact that they have to cause them to actually serve. Okay, and the Rambam, even though we really started off talking about the madichim, but the Rambam also mentions, by contrast, those who were persuaded, the people in the city, they are going to be killed later by sword, not by skila. And they, of course, they actually have to serve it. So either they did the avodas that we learned yesterday, or they accept it as their God. The 2 options that we learned yesterday, that it's either the worshiping or accepting.
Even they did teshuva?
We're going to get to teshuva. We're going to get to those details later. So, like I said, even though we're really talking about the madiach, but it's sort of a contrast to, madiachim are like this, the mudachim are like that. And it's also sort of an introduction for the whole parak. We're going to see the mudachim is going to come up again when he goes through the details, the halachas in detail. We're going to get back to, again, how we give skila to these guys and sayef to these guys. And of course, the halacha of the erenidachas, the killing them, is in Elohim and Esrafin, the list of in Sanhedrin of those who Sreifa, and they also list those who get hariga. It's a very short list of those who get sayef. Now, the final part of halacha Aleph. Says, so as we explained yesterday, we've seen a number of places. It's always important to identify the azhara. There has to be a negative sentence that says, don't do this, and then it's a law with it as hard, then you can give a punishment. Now, if you look in the parsha of Erni Dachas, which was also in last week's parsha 3, so there's no lashon of azhara. It just says that if anashim b'nei b'liyal, if these troublemakers come and they cause this whole thing, this is what you should do to those people who worship the Zara. Where's the azhara? Where do you see that the Madiach was warned? So actually, it's in Parshas Mishpatim, between the din of Shemitah and the din of Shalosh Regam, there's a pasuk in the middle that says, so it mentions something about not mentioning the names of other idols, and the Gemara already says this is for our purposes, this is the Azhara for the Madiach, so that way we can say there's actually a law, a warning, don't be a Madiach. Now the Rambam, before we get back to describing how the Erni Dachas works, the Rambam is going to interrupt to go through all the conditions, many numerous and difficult conditions, in order to actually get to a case of an Erni Dachas in reality. And we're going to get back to the actual mitzvah of Sreifa. That's going to be in Halacha Vav. The assumption here is going to be that besides for the fact that the Madichim have a special din, that we treat the Madichim, the ones who cause the people to do this in a special way, there's also a special din for the Mudachim. They're not being treated like regular Avoda Zara, right? Because they're getting a different punishment, we're going to burn the city. So in order to get this special din, it's not just enough that they all did Avoda Zara, there's going to be a lot of many additional conditions, as we shall see. Halacha Beis, Ein ha'ir nasas Erni Dachas, ad shiyu madicheha shnayim or yeser al shnayim. So first of all, there need to be at least two or more madichim, not one. So this is all going to be based on the first pasuk, I believe, in the story of Erni Dachas. It says, Yatsu anashim b'nei b'liyal mikarbacha v'yadichu sheyesh v'yidim lemer neilcha v'navdal him achenim asher le'yadatem. So a bunch of words there that describe how they're going and causing the trouble. So from 3 words in this pasuk, we're going to learn a number of important dinim. So one is that it's anashim, so it has to be men, has to be multiple. And additionally, it says the word mikirbacha. So those who are causing them to do this have to be from the same tribe in the same city. We're assuming that we're dealing here with a city in Eretz Yisrael that's divided according to the Chalukah of the Shvatim. So there's a particular shevet that's in the city. So it has to be from that shevet in that city. So it tells mikirbacha. So it has to be from among them. It can't be foreigners, people who don't belong to them. And the ad she'adichu ruba v'yu hamudachem mimeya v'adruba shel shevet, as he's going to say in a moment, from the word ha'ir. So it has to be most of the city, and when we say most of the city, there has to be at least 100. That has to be most of a city, at least 100, up to most of the whole shevet in its entirety. But if you went too far, if the city was so big that getting a majority of the city to do a Avoda Zara means you got the majority of the shevet to do Avoda Zara, and then all of a sudden we revert back to the regular din of treating them as individuals. Shnemer anshe ha'ir, says the inhabitants of the city. Now actually the pasuk says yeshvei ha'ir, not anshe, but I think there are other places as well where the Rambam sometimes paraphrases when he quotes psukim. But the point being the word ha'ir anyway. So it says ha'ir leik far katan v'leik krach kadol. So less than 100 would be too small of a city, wouldn't be a city. And if it's the whole, as he's about to say, the whole Pachas Yimei, a kfar, if it's less than 100, we wouldn't call it an ear, we would call it a kfar, a village. But Ubishal Shevet, and if the city is so big that it has most of the Shevet in it, serving Avoda Zara, Krach Gadol, that's already too big of a city, that wouldn't be described as a normal city. So Anoshim, Mikarbecha, Ha'ir, these are all, Dafka has to be this way. And these dinim are all in, just to point out, are Masechus Sanhedrin. They're all in the famous Perek, Kol Yisrael Yeshem Perek Le'elam Haba. So the second half of that Perek is all about the Erni Dachas, all these conditions that relate to Erni Dachas are over there. So, so first we said it in sort of as a positive statement. There have to be 2. There have to be from that city. Now we're going to say it in the negative sense. All the ways that you can run aground of these conditions. So if it was women or children, so that's not a nashim. If it was an individual, so that's not a nashim. Or wasn't the rave of the city, so then I guess you wouldn't call it anshe ha'ir, yeshiv ha'ir. Or no one convinced them at all, so you certainly don't have yatsu anashim there. Or they weren't mikirbecha, they weren't from among them. So in donamba dinner Erni Dachas. So practically speaking, that's not Erni Dachas. Alarehen ki yechidim shal Avoda Zara. It's like any other group of individuals who serve Avoda Zara. Cycling called misha avad. Give the regular din of skila to whoever did it. And the money is going to go to their their heirs, like anyone else that Beis Din kills, unlike what we're going to see what happens to Ner Nidachas, where there's a different thing we do with their possessions. Of course, that's when we speak about Haruge Beis Din and the money, that's usually Masech Sanhedrin, Hilchos Avoda, but we're mentioning it here as a contrast to the Ner Nidachas. All right, so now we're going to get to another condition, the Beis Din. What kind of Beis Din is necessary to do this? So Gimel, Ein Din Ner Nidachas ala Beis Din Agadol Shel Shim Ve'achad. So right off the bat, you need the biggest Beis Din of 71, not the smaller Bati Din, even if they are usually able to do Dinei Nefashos, capital punishment. Shenamar, this is the pasuk not regarding Ner Nidachas. This is a pasuk actually in yesterday's Aliyah and Shaftim. This is just describing a regular situation. So in the regular situation, we bring them, it says, El Sharecha, to your gate, the Sanhedrin, your local Sanhedrin. So Yechidim Neragim Beis Din Shel Shar v'Shar. Remember, we see that Ha'isha individuals, they come to Sharecha, they come to your local Beis Din. But if it's a whole group, if it's going to be Ner Nidachas, here we see the reverse, that it's going to have to be only in the Beis Din HaGadol. Now we move on to the geographic conditions. In Halacha Dalet, Ein achas me'arei miklat nasas Ner Nidachas. So first off, any of the arei miklat, and your miklat cannot be a place where those who committed a murder have to flee for their safety. That cannot become enas Ner Nidachas. Shenamar ba'achas arecha, one of your cities. Now there is a girsa in the many prints ba'achas she'arecha, and I think the Mefarshim usually refer to it as she'arecha. But in Ksav Yad, the manuscripts of the Rambam says arecha, and that's actually the pasuk. Look in the pasuk of Ner Nidachas, it says ba'achas arecha. That's what I'm just going to say. Now the Ram doesn't fully spell it out, but we're about to say, "V'lo Yerushalayim nasas Ner Nidachas." And Yerushalayim can't become Ner Nidachas because it wasn't divided into shvatim. So what are these? What's ba'achas arecha? What's shlein ischak l'shvatim? So the idea seems to be here that the word arecha means your cities. It means it's referring to the cities that were given to you, to the shvatim. So Ir Miklat is a kind of city where the Shevet doesn't really keep it. That doesn't count as its city anymore because the Shevet has to take that city and set it aside to become an Ir Miklat. So it's not really Arecha. It's not like your normal city that belongs to a Shevet. And Yerushalayim is a little more explicit. It's not Arecha because it doesn't belong to any one Shevet. It's sort of a communal city for everyone. So it also wouldn't be described as Arecha. So the Torah wasn't talking about that. Now the Rabbi actually interjects here and says, Lo yadati ma'ayin le'zeh, about the first part, about the Arei Miklat. So where do you get that from? They never be Gemara, El Yerushalayim. Gemara says only Yerushalayim. And he says, the Zara, Kol Arei Miklat, Shvatim Nasnu, Esam Echolkeim. Yerushalayim was never given to anyone. The Arei Miklat were given to the Shvatim, and the Shvatim had to separate them. So according to the Raiva, that means that it is Arecha, because they gave it away. Because they're the ones who gave it, they're the ones who received it. But the Rambam seems to hold that because once they gave it away, it's not theirs anymore. So just because they were the ones who had to give it away, right now it's not theirs, it's not Arecha. The Minchas Chinuch also points out that according to this, it's obvious, although it's not stated until the Minchas Chinuch perhaps came along, that this doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz, because that's certainly not Arecha, that's not Shvatim, none of that would apply in Chutz La'aretz, even though it's not spelled out. So that's that. Now we go on to another kind of geographical condition, that it can't be harmful to Eretz Yisrael. You can't do this in a border city. So the nation shouldn't be able to penetrate Eretz Yisrael through there and destroy the whole land. Of course, we know there are many halachos relating to defending the sovereignty, defending the security of the land, especially when it has to do with the border. And that applies here as well. An additional din, which according to the Rambam seems to be the same kind of idea, that a Beis Din cannot do three cities, three Ner Nidachas, one next to the other. But if they're not next to each other, if it's one here and one there and one there, according to the Rambam, you could do it. Sounds like it might also have to do with sort of damaging if you're just destroying three cities right next to each other. But the Rabbi actually disagrees and says that the Rambam said Beis Din Echad. The Rabbi says it doesn't matter if it's one Beis Din or three Batei Din. You can't do three together. And he says it doesn't matter if it's near each other or not near each other. Even Muruchakas, you can't do it. And Farshim, it all depends on how you learn the Gemara. It's a whole discussion of a Farshim. Now we're going to go on to a special condition about the language used by the Madichim. Halacha hey, ein oisim ir hanidachas ad sheyadichuha madicheha b'lashon Rambam. And they have to use, you speak in the plural. Yemru lehen neilech v'navah. I mean, I guess if they went one by one from person to person in the city, even if they covered the whole city, but they said it on an individual level, on a personal level, hey, let's see, you go ahead and do it, that wouldn't be any dachas. There has to be that they, off the bat, they were coming with this, but let's all do it together. We're trying to get everyone involved. Neilech v'naved, neilech v'nizbach, neilech v'nekater, neilech v'nasech, neilech v'nishtachava, neilech v'nekabel b'loya. So these are 6 l'shainas, so 4 of them, nizbach, nekater, nasech, nishtachava, are the 4 avodas that we learned yesterday. Naved is just a general term that includes everything, and nekabel b'loya is the alternative thing, which is just accepted as a god without actually worshiping it, which also counts as avodah Zara. So v'heim shaimim. So if they listened, and they went ahead and they did it, one of those, either the unique way of Avoda could be the unique way of serving that Avodah Zara. So if they served it in the unique way of that Avodah Zara, or one of the 4, or they accepted it as a god, so then that's what we're talking about. Then the condition was fulfilled. Now we already mentioned in short already in Halacha Aleph, we said who sha'avda v'Avodah Zara shekibul aleim b'alaya. But here it seems like Rambam is making a segue back to actually describing the actual story, and this is sort of an introduction to the next halacha where we're going to move on already to the actual din. So the Rambam wanted at some point to just describe the actual situation, so he starts off with a condition of neilech v'nav, and he turns it into the actual story. And they listened, and they went ahead and they did it, and then that's going to be a continuing into the rest of the halacha. Now again, in the second half of the halacha, he also sort of is repeating something he already said bekitzer in halacha beis. Again, it seems to be like he's telling the story. What if the conditions were not fulfilled? All the things we just learned in halacha beis, gimel, daled, and the beginning of hey. So what do you do? So then there's individual hasra warning, individual testimony for each individual who served Avodah Zara. But they get stoned as individuals, and as we said in halacha beis already, their money goes to their heirs because it's just a normal haruge based and normal people, not any dachas. Like I said, again, it seems like Rambam just wants to say it now as one long story. If they did this, if they went ahead, so then if they didn't fulfill the Tanaim, then this, and then involves continue. And if they did fulfill the conditions, then we're going to get into that whole story. Now, the lashon here is masrin u'me'idin b'chalachad v'echad. We warn and we testify about each one. So the Lechem Mishnah here says mashma dahacha dafka. So he thinks that the Rambam is saying here you would need individual asra for each one. But if it really was a true case of erni dachas, as we're going to see, you send 2 Talmidei Chachamim to warn them. You only need to warn everyone. And that's why the Rambam over there does not mention anything about warning everyone individually. The Gemara seems to say you do need an individual asura. That's for the people that are being the madichim. They have individual asura. But as you'll see soon, as we get to halacha vav, maybe we can say otherwise. Okay, we'll see. Now we're getting to the big halacha vav, which is it's long and it's the din of erni dachas, and at the end we're going to have mitzvah number 10, which is to burn the erni dachas. Now I just want to point out that even though the beginning of Avodah Zara he said it's short, list strife. But if you look in Minyan HaMitzvahs in the beginning of the Sefer, it actually says, so of course the killing is part of the mitzvah, the killing and the burning. And we're going to see that the killing and towards the end of Lachavav and the burning all the way at the end of Lachavav. And the Rambam describes it as being a bunch of steps. As we're going to see, step 1, step 2. So how does it actually work? When it's worthy of being erni dachas, meaning that all of the conditions that we enumerated above are not stopping us, so that's not an issue anymore. And there's something going on in that city. So based on Agadol, first thing is, as we said, the authority belongs to the based on Agadol, so they're the ones who get involved already from step 1. So this is step 1. They have some kind of investigation. Without the Rambam saying that, I guess we would think that the Edom, enough Edom came to Beis Din and reported that what's going on. But the Rambam seems to assume that there's an investigation also. We'll see the Pasuk really says, so that seems to be how the Rambam is applying it here. So based on has some kind of investigation. Ad sheyedu baraya brura shehutcha kol ha'ir eruba, until they know for sure, for sure meaning that there's some very compelling proof that it's the whole city or most of the city. V'chazru l'Avoda Zara, and I'll comment on the word v'chazru in a second, but they're serving Avoda Zara. The Ram doesn't define what a raya brura is, but probably you don't have two Edom that can testify to the whole city as one. Which two Edom would have been likely to have seen everyone? But I guess when you have a bunch of different pairs of Edom coming along, enough of them add up. So at some point, the investigation concludes, B'raya Brura, that this is what happened. Although, as we're going to see soon, and one of the future steps is they start over again. They get Eidos for everybody. Once they show up in the city, they're going to get Eidos for everybody again individually. So apparently this is not quite the kind of eidos that is akin to when a Beis Din is actually sitting and deciding whether to kill someone. As I said, this seems to be based on the pasuk with the Rashi Chakarta v'Shalta Heitev Ine Emes Nachan Adavar Nesasa Te'eva Azois B'Kabecha. So this, or maybe the next steps, are all included in that, determining what actually happened. Now the interesting lesson here, v'chazru. What's v'chazru l'Avoda Zara? Also, earlier in Perek Aleph, there's a lashon there. It says Ad she'archu. He's describing the evolution of Avoda Zara. It says Ad she'archu hayom liYisrael b'Mitzrayim. The Yidden were in Mitzrayim for so long. V'chazru lumid ma'aseh melaved Avoda Zara k'maisan. Also, it says v'chazru. They learned they adapted the behavior of the Egyptians and they started worshiping Avoda Zara. There are actually also two other instances of this use of the word chazru in this kind of way in Hilchos Ishus and Hilchos Gerushin in actual halachic contexts. We're going to actually lead to some confusion. Why is Rambam saying chazru, chayzrin? Something happened before. So this is one of the things that those who are experts on the language of the Rambam say there might be some kind of Arabic influence on the Hebrew usage. We had earlier in the first Perek, we already mentioned the word sham throughout the Rambam. Sheyesh sham matarishon. We had sham many times since then. It just means that there is, not that there is in a particular place. And I'm basing what I'm saying here is based on an article. Someone wrote a whole article actually on like every single word that people say in the Rambam might be, the usage might be unique because of the Arabic. So what does it mean over here? Seemingly the Rambam is using the word chazer here to mean like hafchu. That's, chazer, hafach, there is some similarity to the term. So shahafchu last l'Avoda Zara. They flipped, they turned to Avoda Zara.
Yeah, forefathers.
Right, but over there, no. I don't think the implication is. I don't think that's the. It sounds like the Yidden in Mitzrayim. Nah, it seems more like it's just for Chazir L'Masayim. It would make more sense to say that they switched. They switched what they're doing. In the article I mentioned, he points out they actually do find something like this even in Chazal. He likes to always, the article that I have, likes to always find some, you say in Chazal that it says that Ram didn't completely make it up, innovate in Hebrew. He points out that you have Chazru Beishamai Loimer Kedivri Beis Hillel. No, Beishamai never agreed to Beis Hillel before, so why are you saying Chazru? So clearly Chazru sometimes means you turned towards them, you changed to them. This actually reminds me a bit of off topic, but a few months ago someone pointed out that in this famous story of Rabbi Akiva didn't learn any Torah, and then he finally he was inspired to learn Torah. So it says in Avoda Rabbi Nassan, that's the source for the story. So Avoda Rabbi Nassan says Miyad Chazar Lumei Torah. So the person who was giving a thing of Vart, what's Chazar? He started maybe it means that Rabbi Akiva really did learn Torah before. What's going on here? Pointed out that sometimes chazar just means that someone changed course, someone changed tracks, and chazar l'may Torah doesn't have to mean. Look at the Mefarshim, they also say maybe it means chazar, but shuva, not that chazar always means that you return to something that you were doing before. And to go off topic, a little bit off topic, we already mentioned the story of Avoda Rabbi Nassan. Just a famous, very interesting thing. Everyone knows the story that Akiva, every child, everyone in kindergarten knows that the water was dripping on the stone, and that inspired Rabbi Akiva. Someone once wrote an article, very, very fascinating article. He says, if you look at all the old prints of Avoda Rabbi Nassan and all the manuscripts, it actually says that Rabbi Akiva saw the rope of the pail. He was wondering what caused the hole in the rock, and they said, "Oh, it's the hole. It's the rope of the pail. The rope of the pail rubs against it every day until it caused the hole." And that's what it said in all the original texts of Avoda Rabbi Nassan until in the year 1622, someone came along, someone in Chashuv came and printed some Haggayos in Avoda Rabbi Nassan, and on his own he said, I think it makes more sense to say that it was the water and not the rope. And slowly that Haggah made its way into every print, and that's what everyone knows today, but it's actually, it's the rope, if you look in the original source. Anyway, back on topic. So achar kach, step 2. What's step 2? Achar shochem lehen shnei tamidei chachamim lahazir oisim and lachzir. So we send 2 tamidei chachamim to give a special warning, which according to the Mishnah is the hasra. And now that's something interesting. If they did tshuva, right? We asked if what about tshuva? So if they did tshuva according to the Rambam, never mind, canceled. But if they're standing by their foolishness, so then we move on to step 3. Based on mitzvah and Yisrael Allah Tzava. So the assumption is that if they're not listening to Beis Din to stop sowing the Zara, they're probably also not going to submit themselves to Beis Din's punishment. So you probably have to go to war against the whole city. So you invite all the Yidden preemptively to go join the military and so you create a siege and you fight them until the city is broken open. Now, famous Ravid here. The Ravid says, "Toiva dover shetoil hem tshuva." Very nice, that tshuva. But v'leimat sasi tshuva me'alas achar hasra ma'isa. But if there's a hasra, if there's a warning, and they went ahead and they did it anyways, so how should tshuva help? So I think the simple, at least the straightforward way to me to explain is that for individuals, sure, yeah, even after when the Rambam says it doesn't mean that if Adam come on these individuals and say they serve the Zara, of course they're still going to get punished. We're just talking about the special din of the Irani Dachas. And apparently, in order for the din of Irani Dachas to happen, Beis Din has to arrive when the city is still in an actual state of Irani Dachas right now. But if by the time Beis Din shows up, it's not an Irani Dachas anymore, it's something that happened yesterday, last week, so there's no ear here anymore. We can't fight this ear. It's just a bunch of Yechidim in an ear. Especially if, as we're going to see, they didn't actually get Adam for each individual. The next step is they're going to have Adam to sit and talk about each one.
Yesterday, the Perek, Hilchos is Nisko.
Right. So certainly, that's what I'm saying. Certainly for the individuals, they're not, right, that's a good point. But clearly they're not getting off the hook for their individual behavior. There's a special din of Irani Dachas that by the time they get to the city, there's no Irani Dachas anymore, so you don't punish them for the past. And there's actually a very there's a big sikh about this in the Rabbi, specifically on this topic. Look at the Hilchos Chelik Tes Re'ei Beis. There, the Rabbi based himself on what the Rogatchover says, and the Rabbi goes into great length about it. I don't know if it's exactly the way I said it, but it's this general idea that there's the Metzias of a Tzibur, and the Metzias of the Tzibur disappears if they aren't acting as a Tzibur anymore. So the whole B'din Irani Dachas is based on Tzibur. So then you go to war. Now for step 4, once they break through, once they break into the city and they conquer the city, so then they get a whole bunch of bati din. So apparently you don't need the Beis Din Agadol for the individual. It sounds like you don't need the Beis Din Agadol for the individual tribunals. You have a bunch of tribunals. You judge each one. So here it does mention Hasra, although the Mishnah says it would mean the general Hasra, but maybe not. So if you have 2 Eidim that say that you did Avoda Zara after being warned, so then they put them aside. And then we keep a count. If it turns out at the end of the whole thing that actually they could know, at the end of our count, turns out the whole thing was off base apparently, because we only were able to count a minority. So then the whole thing is canceled after the whole war and everything. It's canceled because it turned out not to be the case. So they get skill, of course, because they did it after Asra, which are in it, so everyone else is saved, and they get skill on the spot because you don't need the Beis Din Agadol really anymore. This is even the local Beis Din Shraga. You could do it over there. But if it turns out it is in fact the majority, so then Malanayis and the Beis Din Agadol, so then you have to actually bring them up to the Beis Din Agadol. I don't know if that means in Yerushalayim or the Beis Din Agadol itself arrived over there, but they have to be brought before the Beis Din Agadol, and then once that whole group of people is brought before them, now the Beis Din Agadol can Goyim Shamdinam in the presence of them all together, and then Beis Din Agadol says, okay, you are in fact the majority, you are in fact the city. And then they actually kill everyone with a sword. And if every single adult male did Avoda Zara, then we kill everyone alive by sword, including the women and the children, even if they didn't do anything. I mentioned that in the Sikha about the Din Tzibur, that they're included in the Tzibur. And if it's just a majority, not an actual every single person, so then you don't kill the women and children or the people who didn't serve Avoda Zara. Then only the wives and children of those who did Avoda Zara are killed, and those who didn't, and their wives and children are not killed. Right. And this is all based on the next pasuk. Hake taka syesh ve'ir hahila fichara hachnamayis of kol shabba vesvahamta leficharav. So that's what we're describing in terms of the psukim. This is the pasuk we're up to and what we're describing here. Continues with the rest of the dinim. Whether it's all of them or most of them, the madichim. Don't forget the madichim. They get skila. Now we move on to the next one. We take all their possessions into the street. If there isn't the street, it has to be in the street. What if their main street was sort of outside the city? You build the wall around it until it's inside the city. So that's in the next pasuk. It's called Shlala Tikbait, so Terech Chayva, V'Sarafta B'Eish, Seir V'Skol Shlala Kol Hashem Lekach, V'Eis Tel Elam Yisban Oy. So the Chayva is important, has to be in the street. Like the psukim say, you have to kill everyone, anything that's alive, any animal really. V'Seifin is called Shalom Hamadina B'Eish, and then everything gets, the animals get killed first, and then everything else gets burned, the whole city with everything. So they fast. Mitzvah say, here's the mitzvah that we're talking about. Mitzvah 10. Shenever V'Sarafta B'Eish Seir is called Shalala. So that's this mitzvah. Now, we said that tzaddikim, those who didn't survey the Zara, are saved, but their money has a different din. Everyone else who was not hudach with everyone else, but still their possessions are nisraf and mechal shtala, their possessions are burned. Because they live there, they lose their possessions. And now this is mitzvah. I think the Rambam is sort of skipping it. Mitzvah 12 actually. If you have hana from any of this, like achas, you get malchus shenemar liyidbak biyadchem u'umim and acherim. Part of it is that you shouldn't take any of it. It's chayrim. It's completely not for anyone to take. So if you take, you get malchus. Ches, interesting din of edim zayim. What if there were edim and they went through the whole process, and then turns out they're edim zayim, and there were other edim that said you were somewhere else when the whole story happened. It's an interesting halacha. If you grab at that moment, you run and grab stuff from the city, you can keep it. And of course, you can enjoy it, because the whole thing was canceled. So it's not like you're grabbing things that were about to be burned. Nothing's getting burned anymore. The whole thing was called off. So on the one hand, it's not being burned. The whole thing was called off. On the other hand, you can go and grab the stuff and keep it. So why is that? This is happening between when Beis Din already said this is the Erni Dachas, Nigmar Dina was the end of the case, and before I guess it actually happened, or at least before the stuff got burned. So if you sneak in that interim moment, everyone who was about to get killed before they were saved had already sort of given up on his possessions. Interesting halacha. Hafker. Yeah, Hafker. And now for mitzvah 11, you can never rebuild it. What about the
Yoshim? The Yoshim will get it?
It was Hefker. I mean, once they come back, they can reclaim everything. And if no one grabbed it, then I guess the Yoshim can take it. But no one can take it, really. If they're getting killed anyway, skila. And it's never rebuilt. Whenever it does build, it gets malchus as well. It says it should not be rebuilt. But you could turn it into gardens, vineyard, into orchards, which means it shouldn't be built as it was before, a city, not plant things. That's fine. It's not like maybe Egla Rufa where you can't plant anything. You can plant stuff. Now, halacha test. What about people who happen to be there? Do they get count as well? There's a caravan going from place to place. And if they were there at the time and they were also serving the word of Zara together, if they're there 30 days, and if they're counted along, they get killed the same. And their possessions are lost. And if not, 30 days, the normal halacha of a regular Avoda Zara, and this is, I think, for many other dinim as well, 30 days is usually what defines whether you're a member of the city or not. And now, what about other stuff that's there in the city? What if other people's stuff was there as a pikadon? It's in people's houses, but doesn't belong. It doesn't belong to them. Even if the people watching it in the city have taken financial responsibility, it's not burned. It's returned to the owner. It has to be the bounty of this city, not stuff that belongs to elsewhere. What about the reverse? What if the people who live there had stuff in a different country? If it was gathered back along with the whole heap, then it does get burned because you gathered it. But if it never got returned, if it's still sitting somewhere else, then you don't have to destroy it. So it's not just about the identity, it's the identity plus the location. So if it's not in that location, then it's not shlala. You can actually end up in the heir's possession. Yudalef. Shutfis. Behema. Chetzer shaler nidachas v'chetzer cheres. Half belongs to the city, half belongs to elsewhere. Shayis b'seich, but it was in the city at the time. Harezu asura. It is asura because part of that animal is their nidachas. But isa she came in. If it's dough mutaris, then it's okay. If you shaf shalach l'gisa, then you divide the dough. You give half to the hair and half you burn. You'd baze. Back to mitzvah number 12, which is really should be next. So now we're going to get back to hana. Behema shalir nidach shenishchata asura bahana kasher haniskol she nishchat. So an animal that was shechted, it's but we say you don't burn the animals, you kill the animals. So if you shechted it instead of just killing it, you still can't enjoy it because it's like a shar haniskol, Shraga gets skila. Zara, what about a hair? The men and women, if it's attached to their heads and got cut off, you could use that. But if it already become a wig before, it was a wig from that city, then it's already part of their possessions. For us, and it's forbidden. Fruit on the trees, which are generally palm trees, mutar and permitted shenama tick bites after you have to gather it. It's only if all you need to do is gather. But if it's attached, you also need to disconnect it and then gather it and then burn it. They're not counted. Not the story with the hair. Also, the hair was still attached to the head. You couldn't just gather it. Inside the claimer, he wanted to add much of this, and certainly the trees themselves are okay. But eventually, and then they go to the heirs. Things that are hektish. If it's supposed to be a carbon yumusu, you have to kill it. You can't bring it as a carbon because Hashem doesn't want such a carbon. By the kabayis, if it was donated to the base mikdash's fund, you padu. So first you switch it for money, then you burn it. You can't burn it while it still belongs to the base of mikdash, but you can't give it to the base of mikdash either. So you have to take away that shemayim from it, switch it to other money, and then you can burn it. If they're whole without a mum, is just like any other carbon. Same halach as a carbon. If there's a mum, then it's like any ordinary animal in a rag, and they can actually get killed. If there's truma the imig yuliat kayin, if it belonged to a kayin, they're Yerkavah. It's like anything else he owns. You can't burn it because it's holy. So it's like the animals, the kachim is be'ach yumusu. We don't actually kill them. We just lock them away. You just can't do anything with them because it's holy to some extent. So you can't destroy it, but you can't use it either because it's nidachas. So it's stuck in between. So Yerkavah should rot. But if the yid had the truma, he didn't give it to the kayin yet. In this case, actually, just give it to another kain and it's totally fine. And first, we get into all the different halachas. No time for that at all. Tasvav ma'aser sheni v'chesed ma'aser sheni v'chesed v'kadosh b'seicha hare eli yiganzu ma'aser sheni or the money ma'aser sheni or even the holy books. In this case, you don't burn it. You actually just you bury it. You shouldn't use it though, so you bury it. The zayin kol eized de'renidachas. Whoever carries out this din hare is the kamakid of oila kol. It's like being an oila. You're burning it completely. So just it's like an oil that you burn completely. You make Hashem happy. You're taking away the anger of Hashem. Also in that pasuk, maybe it brings blessing and mercy from Hashem. All from these psukim.